This is We Told You So, episode 85. As I reported in the previous episode, Trump's trade and deportation plans are going to be disastrous for the food supply. I showed a clip in the last video about how migrants are starting to not show up to work in the agriculture industry, which is causing a hit to production. This is, of course, driving up prices. And while the MAGA were complaining all the time about the price of eggs, in the last week the price of eggs has gone up by more than a third. So they voted for a fascist who said he would give them cheaper eggs and no wars. He gave them more expensive eggs, and he's threatening to attack 4 countries. But now he's also, because of his executive orders, rolling back Biden's drug pricing initiatives and making prescription drugs more expensive. So Biden went ahead and lowered your insulin costs, and you voted for Donald Trump to raise the price. That was smart. Meanwhile, the police union that endorsed Donald Trump before the election is now really angry at him for his January 6 pardons. Much like members of Congress like Hakeem Jeffries were saying, whatever happened to back the blue? Whatever happened to being the party of law and order? When a group of people violently smash their way into the Capitol and smear shit on the walls and desecrate the Capitol, you go ahead and pardon them? The police are kind of pissed about that. Because many of those officers that were attacked, while they were not unalived, they suffered traumatic injuries, permanently disabling injuries. Yet those people that committed those crimes are now just free to walk the streets. Oh, and commit more violence for Donald Trump. Meanwhile, on Fox News, Trump said that he might consider prosecuting Biden because he didn't give himself a pardon. Let me remind you that the Republicans tried for over a year to try to impeach Joe Biden for shit that ended up being entirely made up by an informant. And that entire thing fell apart and had egg all over their faces. Because it's going to be hilarious when Trump tries to prosecute Biden and has absolutely no reason for it. Then again, what was that about weaponizing the justice system? Because that's the funny part. MAGA thinks this is totally okay for him to go after Joe Biden for absolutely no reason. Because they considered that the same thing he did to Trump. Even though Biden was not involved in the prosecution of Donald Trump at all. And the multiple prosecutors going against Donald Trump had hundreds of people's sworn testimony, thousands of pieces of evidence, and even evidence of Trump's own words and recordings of him admitting to those crimes. But nope, Joe Biden must be the criminal because the dear leader says so. At least he got knocked down a peg when a judge temporarily blocked his order restricting birthright citizenship. The judge openly mocked Trump's lawyers, saying, "Do you think this is constitutional? Because it's blatantly unconstitutional." It's good to see that there are still some people holding the line. Despite Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins voting no on Pete Hegseth for his confirmation, he's advanced to the next step. Then again, these are the 2 most wishy-washy Republicans in the Senate. But Pete Hegseth advanced to the next level and is now going to get his final vote on his confirmation, even after during his testimony he told a senator he paid $50,000 to a woman who accused him of sexual assault. Also, he's a massive drunk. Sounds like a great person to lead the Pentagon, doesn't it? Well, the MAGA are out all over social media trying to defend Elon Musk's Yahtzee salute, which he did multiple times. And there have been videos showing the comparison between him and other Yahtzees doing it, and it's exactly the same fucking thing. The MAGA are out there trying to say, well, he's autistic. You know, I know lots of autistic people, including one of my children and my wife. They don't go around randomly throwing Yahtzee salutes. That's not really a thing. Plus, it's insulting to autistic people. But that's okay. We'll just have to use that excuse too. States that have abortion bans are starting to hide their maternal mortality rates. Most notably recently, Georgia. Georgia Department of Public Health is disbanding a board that tracks critical maternal mortality health data. This comes after confidential information was leaked to ProPublica, which recently reported on 2 deaths linked to Georgia's abortion restrictions. Because, of course, the Republicans in this country don't want people to know that if you take away abortion, it actually causes millions of women to die. So they'll just hide those numbers like they did when COVID was ravaging the country and Trump was doing nothing about it. And in a recent hilarious development, a Mississippi Democratic state lawmaker introduced a Contraception Begins at Erection Act, with a fine for anyone who cranks one off without the intent of fertilization. I find this to be hilarious and genius. He said all across the country, especially here in Mississippi, the vast majority of bills relating to contraception or abortion focus on the woman's role when men are 50% of the equation. So why don't we make men do their part? I'm sure he knows it'll go absolutely nowhere, but the whole point is pointing out the hypocrisy, which he did well. And lastly, everybody's talking about this. The fact that a Republican representative has proposed a third-term constitutional amendment for Donald Trump. A whole bunch of lying and ass-kissing, saying Trump's decisive leadership stands in stark contrast to the chaos, suffering, and economic decline that we've endured for 4 years. See earlier comment on best economy in the G7. He said Trump is trying to reverse our nation's decay and he needs the time to accomplish that goal. Pump the brakes there, Spartacus. First of all, I very highly doubt Donald Trump will still be with us in 4 years. Not only is Donald Trump suffering from genetic dementia and cognitive decline, but his arteries are already harder than he gets at a teen beauty pageant. He's not going to be here long enough for that third term. But also, this would require a constitutional amendment. It would require a constitutional convention, which the Republicans have been wanting for years, so that they can rewrite the Constitution any way they want. There are no guidelines. They could literally rewrite the Constitution to say that citizens who have rights in this country are only straight white Christian men. They could literally write the Constitution to say that slavery is okay. They could do anything they want. That's why they want that constitutional convention. But it requires 2/3 of the state legislatures, which they still don't have. This whole thing right here is just a distraction from the other horrible things that Donald Trump is doing. Because remember, throughout Donald Trump's entire life, everything is smoke and mirrors. Somebody compared it to a WWE event. It's all flashy and loud with him saying a bunch of crazy stuff, but at the end of the day, he always self-sabotages himself and he never delivers on what he says he's going to do. The man is just an inept old narcissist. He says shit like this to upset people on the left and to distract from all of the horrible things he's doing. Things like I mentioned about rounding up immigrants and natural citizens and detaining or jailing them without due process. He's all about distraction. So remember, whenever Trump says something really crazy, which I know is like every day, but it's because he once again just wants to change the news cycle and deflect away from what he's doing. This has been We Told You So. While the fucking around continues, the finding out has just begun.